Majority Whip with us right now, sits on the Commerce Committee as well, as luck would have it. Senator, always good having you. I notice you guys didn't
Thanks,
waste
Neil.
any time trying to get these chieftains to your committee on this subject. Is that what you're trying to find out, how they decided on this subject to block people from transferring this information to other folks?
Yes, and actually we've been at this for a while. We had actually issued a subpoena, the Commerce Committee did, to get them to come, and they, without having the subpoena actually having to be delivered, they agreed to come and testify in front of the committee. So it's Facebook, it's Google, and it's Twitter, and I think it's a conversation we need to have, Neil. We need to find out exactly what they are doing in terms of content moderation policies. And, when they either suppress or amplify individual users' content, certainly this example with the New York Post and their users is an example of why not only the entities like the New York Post, but also their users who might link to their website need due process. They need to find out why these decisions are being made. And I think that this is a matter of transparency, and it's a matter of accountability to the American people.
Senator, I know conservatives saying they disproportionately target conservative thought, and of late there's been a lot of evidence of that. But I can remember liberals complaining just a few years ago that Facebook practically paved the way for then candidate Trump to become President Trump because it entertained all sorts of stuff, specious and otherwise, that got on. So are you worried that you might get what you wish for, and that all of a sudden you could be shutting down debate of any sort?
Well, I think what this points to, Neil, and you've already seen the FCC and Chairman Pai has indicated that they have jurisdiction over Section 230, and they're going to come up with a rulemaking to clarify the rules. But I also think that Section 230 in the law needs to be reformed, honestly. I mean, it was a 1996 statute. It was when the Internet was in its infancy. And we've come a long way from that. And you now have essentially three companies that have virtually monopoly power in their particular space of the market. And I think there has to be some accountability. Now, the Democrats, up until now, as you pointed out, have been interested in that as well. Currently, it's Republicans who seem in conservative content that seems to be getting censored. But I would hope that there would be bipartisan interest in bringing these big companies to account, not only because of their monopoly power, but also because of the shield against liability that they have with respect to the way that they moderate content. And those issues need to be looked at again.
What if they don't?
And it's
they
time
argue,
for Congress
Senator,
to have
that they're not trying. I'm sorry, sir. They argue that they're really not moderating content. They argue that they never took the story down. They did make it very difficult to reduce its distribution. So therein lies the rub. But if this were a story that was had some specious elements to it concerning, let's say, the president, and they were to do the same thing and hold off letting people resend that, you'd endorse that, wouldn't you?
Well, it acts, I think, again, they act as a filter, and they create a bubble for users. And they use algorithms for users to see what they think those users want to see. And this is a big problem. I mean, I think you've got now three companies essentially editing everything and limiting what the American people have access to in terms of users on these platforms. So they've got to be accountable.
Would you break them up? Senator, would you break them up? Some of your Democratic colleagues, for very different reasons, say they've gotten too big for their britches and we should break them up. Do you support that?
There is a good argument to be made that they exercise monopolistic power in the market. And I think that's an issue probably more for the Judiciary Committee than for the Commerce Committee. But we certainly want to look at the question of Section 230 and how that's being applied, and whether or not these big platforms are acting, as they say, as neutral platforms, or have they in fact become publishers? Are they now stepping on the content and deciding what is and what isn't seen by the American people? And if they're preventing it from being distributed via Twitter, that too is that's an action that filters the content the American people see. And if we're going to have an open market, we got to have an open market. If we're not, we need to figure out what the parameters ought to be. And I think this whole issue of content moderation is something that the American people need to have looked at by their elected leaders, by policymakers in Washington. And so I'm glad we're having a hearing. I hope we get some answers, and I hope we get some movement on reform.
Very quickly, we have about 30 seconds, and I'm sorry, but Mitch McConnell seems to put
That's
the
right.
kibosh on aggressive stimulus here. The president wanted to go big, go even bigger. Mitch McConnell is at the 500 billion mark. Are you? That, in other words, nothing bigger will be entertained by the U.S. Senate.
I think there's probably we would have some votes for something that would be bigger than that, but the bigger it gets, the fewer Republican votes you're going to have. I have to count the votes, so I kind of know what that threshold is. But it's as much the policy as it is the number. I mean, the number is important, but the components, the features of the bill are also important. And I think the leader is pointing out that the Democrats are being intransigent in what they're asking for.
All right. All right. We'll see what happens. Senator Thune, always good catching up with you. John Thune.